You won't believe what happened the moment Bruce Lee stepped into that dojo. The air was thick with tension, almost like time itself was holding its breath. Every eye was on the samurai, a master whose reputation stretched across nations. People whispered stories of his unmatched skill, his lightning-fast strikes, and his ability to predict his opponent's every move before they even thought it. Yet, that day, something, or rather someone, was about to rewrite everything they thought they knew about combat. The samurai stood tall, calm, confident. His presence alone made the room shrink. You could feel the authority radiating from him, the kind that makes even the strongest challengers hesitate. He was ready for any test, any opponent, except for the one who was about to step forward. Enter the girl. At first glance, she seemed ordinary, slight, unassuming, and almost fragile. The kind of person you might overlook in a crowded street, let alone a battle-ready dojo. Yet, the way she walked toward the center of the room made every person watching pause. There was a quiet confidence in her steps, a stillness in her breathing, and a sharpness in her eyes that didn't belong to someone so young or so seemingly delicate. Bruce Lee, standing at the side, couldn't hide his curiosity. Even he, a legend known for witnessing the extraordinary, felt his eyebrows lift in disbelief. Something about her presence screamed potential, power, mastery hidden behind an ordinary frame. The samurai, on the other hand, smirked. Perhaps he thought he was playing a simple game. Perhaps he underestimated her. Maybe he assumed she was a child, a novice, someone who posed no real threat. After all, how could someone so small, so unassuming, even imagine challenging a master of his caliber? And then it happened. She reached for her weapon, or so everyone thought. But what appeared in her hands were nothing more than two ordinary chopsticks. The crowd froze. The samurai blinked. Even Bruce Lee's jaw tightened. There was a moment, a heartbeat, where reality itself seemed to pause. Could it really be possible? Could these tiny sticks be the instruments that would defy centuries of martial tradition? That moment, that split second, would change everything. Not just for the samurai, not just for Bruce Lee, but for everyone in the room who witnessed it. Because sometimes true mastery doesn't come from size, power, or reputation. It comes from skill, precision, and the element of surprise. And this girl, she had all of it. The dojo was silent. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, not even the faintest sound of air moving. It was as if the world itself had paused to watch. Every pair of eyes, every heartbeat, every breath was locked on the moment that was about to unfold. The samurai's confidence, so unshakable moments ago, began to ripple with uncertainty. He had faced countless opponents in his life, yet something about this girl unsettled him in a way he had never experienced. She stood at the center, calm and composed, holding nothing more than the two slender chopsticks in her hands. There was no armor, no fancy weapons, no dramatic flourish, just her. And yet, there was an intensity in her gaze, an unspoken promise that she was not to be underestimated. Bruce Lee's eyes narrowed. He had seen masters, prodigies, and legends, but this was something different. The samurai shifted his weight, preparing for the first strike. His movements were precise, rehearsed, and lethal. Every stance, every feint, every breath was calculated. He assumed she would falter, that her attacks would be weak, predictable, and easy to counter. But what he didn't understand, and what the room was about to witness, was the depth of her skill. Her hands moved almost imperceptibly, the chopsticks dancing between her fingers like extensions of her very body. She didn't lunge, she didn't strike. She flowed. Every motion was fluid, every flick of the wrist measured with precision that defied belief. The samurai attempted a strike, fast as lightning, but she anticipated it, not with force, not with brute strength, but with an uncanny understanding of timing, balance, and leverage. Bruce Lee leaned forward, unable to hide his amazement. Even the greatest martial artists rely on instinct and reaction, but this girl seemed to operate on a level beyond instinct. She was reading the samurai before he even made a decision. Every move he executed was met with effortless countermeasures. Every advance she parried with an elegance that seemed almost impossible. The crowd gasped. Whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire. Is she really doing this? How is this even possible? Those are just chopsticks. But the evidence was undeniable. The samurai, once untouchable, now struggled. His strikes were blocked, his defenses bypassed, his confidence shaken. Each second that passed added to the tension, each flick of her chopsticks sending a silent message. Skill is not measured by size or reputation. It is measured by precision, focus, and mastery. Bruce Lee's mind raced. He had trained with the best, faced the fiercest, and mastered countless techniques himself. Yet, even he felt the thrill of disbelief, the intoxicating realization that he was witnessing something truly extraordinary. The girl's movements were not just skillful, they were transformative. Every strike, every block, every flick of the wrist was a lesson, a revelation that challenged everything he had learned about combat. And the samurai? He began to falter, not because he was weak, but because he had never faced anyone like her. Every step he took, every attack he launched, was countered with surgical precision. He realized, in that heart-stopping moment, that mastery was not about power. It was about vision, control, and the courage to defy expectations. The tension in the room was unbearable. Everyone's eyes were glued to the battle, hearts pounding, minds racing. The samurai had underestimated her. Bruce Lee had never seen such audacity. And the girl, calm as ever, continued to move with the grace and focus of someone who had mastered the impossible. In that instant, it became clear this was not just a fight. This was a lesson in humility, skill, and the kind of genius that can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. The dojo was electric now. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat louder. The samurai's strikes, once so fearsome, were being dismantled with astonishing ease. It wasn't just skill, it was audacity, creativity, and a level of precision that seemed almost supernatural. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, watching the improbable unfold. The girl didn't attack in the way anyone expected. She didn't swing, punch, or kick. She didn't rely on raw strength or force. Instead, she moved like water, fluid and unpredictable, turning the samurai's aggression into his own vulnerability. Every flick of her chopsticks redirected his strikes. Every subtle step destabilized him, and every shift in her stance hinted at moves that no one in the room had ever seen. Bruce Lee's eyes widened. Even he, a man who had mastered countless forms of combat, had never witnessed such a paradox. Someone so small, using nothing but chopsticks, commanding a room filled with martial experts. His mind raced. How is she doing this? How is she reading him before he even moves? The samurai's confidence faltered. He had expected a duel, a test of strength or speed, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't just a fight, it was a demonstration of mind over matter, of strategy over force. Every attack he attempted was anticipated, deflected, and transformed into an opportunity for the girl. The chopsticks weren't just tools. They were extensions of her will, instruments of mastery that turned even the samurai's legendary skills against him. The spectators were silent, unable to tear their eyes away. Some whispered in disbelief, others held their breath, and a few even backed away slightly, sensing the intensity radiating from the center. It was as if the dojo had transformed into a theater of impossibility, where skill, timing, and cunning triumphed over brute strength and reputation. The samurai attempted a daring strike, his movements faster and more aggressive than ever. His face was a mask of focus, his body coiled with power. But she was ready. With the slightest twist of her wrist, she intercepted his attack, her chopsticks glinting in the dim light. The strike that was meant to overpower her was redirected harmlessly to the floor. Every counter seemed effortless, almost casual, yet it was executed with deadly precision. Bruce Lee could hardly believe it. He leaned forward, eyes locked on her hands, trying to decipher the secret behind her incredible timing. The girl moved with confidence and calm that seemed impossible for someone her age and size. Each strike she blocked was a statement, each motion a lesson. Mastery isn't about muscle, it's about vision, patience, and intuition. The samurai's expression began to change. Frustration crept in, thin lines forming around his eyes as he realized something he had never admitted before. He was being outclassed, not in strength, not in speed, not even in raw skill, but in anticipation and ingenuity. Every step he took was met with a counter he couldn't predict. Every offensive he launched was turned into a defensive trap. The tension was unbearable. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone felt it. The impossible was happening. And yet, despite the mounting pressure, the girl's face remained calm. Her eyes were sharp, her movements precise, her focus unbreakable. The dojo was no longer just a place of combat. It had become a stage for brilliance, a place where expectations were shattered and legends were challenged. Bruce Lee's jaw tightened. He knew greatness when he saw it, and in that moment, he saw something extraordinary unfold. This was not just a lesson in martial arts. It was a lesson in perception, strategy, and the untapped potential of human skill. And then, in a heartbeat, in the quietest instant, the first move that would define the entire encounter came. A subtle flick, almost imperceptible, a motion so slight that most eyes could not follow. But the samurai felt it too late. He stumbled, unbalanced, and the chopsticks, her unlikely instruments of mastery, found their mark. Time seemed to stretch. Every spectator held their breath. Bruce Lee's eyes widened, heart pounding with disbelief. The samurai, undefeated for years, was caught off guard in the most extraordinary way imaginable. And all it took was two ordinary chopsticks in the hands of a masterful girl who refused to be underestimated. The dojo erupted with silent awe. This was no longer a fight, it was a revelation. And in that instant, one undeniable truth became clear to everyone present. Skill, precision, and ingenuity will always surpass reputation and brute force. The dojo was silent, yet the silence was heavier than any shout could ever be. Every eye was fixed on the girl, and every heartbeat seemed to echo in the vast room. The samurai, who had never known defeat, now wavered under the subtle, unstoppable control she wielded. His confidence, once as solid as steel, was crumbling under her calculated precision. The spectators couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Some gasped audibly. Others instinctively stepped back, feeling the force of her presence, even without a single violent strike. It wasn't just that she was countering every move. It was how effortlessly she did it. Every block, every deflection, every motion seemed choreographed yet alive, natural yet impossible. The chopsticks weren't just tools. They were extensions of her mind, guiding her through a dance of skill that no one could interrupt. Bruce Lee's expression was a mix of disbelief and awe. He had seen countless masters, trained with legends, and performed feats that most could only dream of. And yet, even he felt a surge of amazement that was hard to put into words. This isn't just skill, this is genius, he thought. Every movement, every subtle adjustment, every precise flick of those tiny sticks revealed a depth of mastery that transcended normal human comprehension. The crowd began whispering in stunned tones, their voices barely above a murmur. She's too fast. I can't follow her hands. How is she reading him? They weren't just impressed, they were shaken. The dojo had transformed from a space of training into a theater of impossibility. Each person watching was mentally trapped, unable to look away, unable to blink, afraid of missing the next unbelievable moment. Even the samurai's students, many of whom had trained alongside him for years, were in awe. They had been taught that their master's skill was untouchable, legendary. But now, they saw him falter, not from fatigue or error, but because of sheer unpredictability and genius. The lesson he had never taught them, the lesson they had never truly grasped, was being shown right before their eyes. Mastery isn't about strength. It isn't about years of practice or fearsome reputation. It's about vision, timing, and an unwavering mind. Bruce Lee leaned forward, his hands clenching unconsciously. He could feel the pulse of the dojo, the electricity in the air, the tension that seemed to pull everyone forward into the moment. His mind raced, analyzing every angle, every move, trying to understand the genius unfolding before him. But logic alone couldn't explain it. Experience alone couldn't predict it. What the girl was demonstrating was a level of insight and control that even legends struggled to comprehend. And yet, amidst the awe, there was something more profound happening. The spectators were no longer just watching a fight. They were experiencing a revelation. Their emotions oscillated between disbelief and inspiration, shock and admiration. Every failed attack by the samurai heightened the suspense. Every seamless counter by the girl intensified the psychological grip. Mentally, the audience was trapped. Emotionally, they were hooked. They couldn't look away, couldn't think about anything else, because every moment challenged their understanding of skill, strength, and possibility. Even the samurai felt it. His mind raced, adrenaline pumping through his veins, and yet he couldn't shake the mental weight pressing down on him. This girl, this young, seemingly ordinary girl, had cracked his defenses not through brute force, but through intelligence, precision, and an unyielding mind. Every strike she deflected, every step she anticipated, chipped away at his legendary confidence. And Bruce Lee, standing on the sidelines, realized something that would stay with him forever. This wasn't just a demonstration of skill. This was a lesson in humility, strategy, and the extraordinary power of focus. The dojo had become a mirror reflecting the ultimate truth of martial arts. True mastery isn't about dominance. It's about understanding, control, and the courage to defy expectation. The room held its breath as she prepared for the next move. Every eye followed her hands. Every mind tried to predict her motion, and every heart raced in anticipation. What was coming next? How would she continue to defy logic? How could two tiny sticks possibly contain such unimaginable power? And then, in a heartbeat, the stage was set for the moment that would leave everyone, including Bruce Lee, utterly speechless. The room was charged with tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Every eye was glued to the center of the dojo. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, echoing in the minds of all who watched. The samurai's confidence, once unwavering, had crumbled beneath the precision of a girl no one expected to be a master. And Bruce Lee was no longer just an observer. He was utterly captivated, mentally caught in the impossible spectacle unfolding before him. The girl's posture was calm, almost serene, as if she were performing a familiar dance rather than defending against one of the most formidable fighters alive. The chopsticks in her hands were extensions of her very being, moving in ways that seemed to bend logic. Every flick, every tap, every subtle deflection was executed with such precision that it felt almost like magic. And yet, it was all skill. She had trained, mastered, and understood movement to a level that surpassed even the samurai's legendary experience. The samurai took a deep breath. He had faced countless opponents, each believing themselves capable of defeating him. But none had ever challenged him in this way. None had anticipated every strike, exploited every opening, and turned every attack into a trap before he could even complete it. His eyes flickered with disbelief. He had expected a duel, a test of strength and skill, but this was something else entirely. Something extraordinary. Bruce Lee's mind raced. He had always believed that mastery came from practice, discipline, and intuition. But watching her, he realized there was another dimension to skill, a clarity of mind that transcended physical ability. Her calm, deliberate movements weren't just techniques. They were statements, lessons, demonstrations of a mind so sharp it could anticipate and neutralize the deadliest threats. The spectators were on the edge of their seats, unable to breathe normally. Some clutched their hands over their mouths. Others leaned forward, straining to see every subtle movement. Even the senior students, trained under the samurai for years, could barely process what was happening. Every step, every flick of the chopsticks, every minimal shift in her stance sent waves of disbelief through the room. The impossible was happening, and it was happening in front of their very eyes. The samurai lunged, faster than a striking viper, aiming for a decisive blow. Every muscle in his body was coiled with force, every strike meant to end the duel in an instant. But the girl's eyes were steady. Her hands moved almost invisibly, redirecting his strike with a gentle, precise flick of her chopsticks. The force he had relied upon to dominate opponents now ricocheted harmlessly, leaving him off balance and exposed. Bruce Lee's breath caught. Even he could feel the tension coursing through his veins. This wasn't just a fight. It was a mental trap, a demonstration of brilliance that defied expectation. The girl was not merely defending herself. She was orchestrating a spectacle, a symphony of skill and strategy that left everyone mentally and emotionally ensnared. The audience couldn't look away. Their minds raced to predict her next move, yet she remained unpredictable, untouchable, and mesmerizing. The samurai tried to recover, circling, striking, searching for an opening. But each attempt was met with effortless precision. Every anticipated counter chipped away at his confidence, forcing him to question what he thought he knew. Skill, reputation, and experience were no match for the combination of anticipation, intuition, and creativity she displayed. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch time itself, she saw the opportunity. The split-second opening that even the samurai couldn't detect, a tiny lapse that would define the duel. With a flick so fast, it was almost invisible, she executed a motion so precise that it caught him completely off guard. The chopsticks, seemingly ordinary, became the instruments of an extraordinary victory. The room gasped in unison. Bruce Lee's eyes widened, jaw tightening, as he realized the samurai, legendary, undefeated, was undone by someone everyone had underestimated. The impossible had happened. Every mind in that dojo was trapped in awe, disbelief, and exhilaration. And in that instant, it became clear true mastery isn't measured by size, strength, or reputation. It's measured by precision, insight, and the courage to defy expectation. The stage was set. The moment that would be remembered, talked about, and replayed in memory forever had arrived. The dojo erupted, not with shouts, but with an almost reverent silence, the kind that follows a revelation too powerful for words. The samurai, once a figure of absolute dominance, now stood frozen, his pride fractured, his confidence shaken to its core. The girl, calm as ever, lowered her chopsticks slowly, almost ceremoniously, like a conductor finishing a symphony. Every eye in the room was locked on her, and every mind was struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Bruce Lee was at the edge of his seat, his mind racing faster than ever. Even he, a master of martial arts who had studied countless techniques and faced the deadliest opponents, was caught in the grip of awe. He leaned forward, his hands curled into fists, eyes wide, absorbing every detail of the incredible display. The precision, the anticipation, the sheer audacity. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Even for a legend, this was a lesson in humility. The spectators were shaken. Some sank to their knees, stunned, as if the intensity of the moment had physically knocked the wind out of them. Others covered their mouths, whispering incomprehensible combinations of disbelief and admiration. She did it. Unbelievable. How is that even possible? Every individual in the room felt the psychological weight of what had occurred. The girl had not just won. She had rewritten the rules of what they thought possible. The samurai's students watched with wide eyes, their reverence turning into awe, mixed with a hint of fear. They had idolized their master for years, followed him without question, trained endlessly under his tutelage. But in those moments, they realized that true mastery was not bound by reputation or strength. It was measured by intellect, anticipation, and the ability to think several steps ahead. Their worldviews had shifted in an instant, and their minds were racing to catch up. Bruce Lee's thoughts were relentless. He replayed every movement, every flick, every counter. He could see the genius in her strategy, the brilliance in her timing, and the absolute control she wielded with two seemingly ordinary sticks. The girl had not just defeated a master. She had taught an unspoken lesson to every person in that room, including one of the greatest martial artists of all time. It was a humbling, electrifying realization. Mastery was more than skill. It was vision, foresight, and an unbreakable mind. Even the samurai, still trying to recover from his shock, managed to nod slightly. There was no anger in his eyes, no resentment. Instead, there was a begrudging respect, an acknowledgement of the extraordinary talent that had just bested him. He understood, perhaps more than anyone else in the room, that this was no ordinary victory. This was the triumph of intellect over brute strength, precision over reputation, and creativity over predictability. The atmosphere in the dojo shifted. Where tension had reigned, now awe and inspiration took its place. Everyone present felt a strange mix of emotions: shock, disbelief, admiration, and even a spark of aspiration. They had witnessed the impossible, and it had left a mark on their minds that would not fade. The girl's mastery was no longer just a display of skill. It was a psychological imprint, a mental trap that held the audience captive, forcing them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about combat and capability. Bruce Lee finally exhaled, slowly, deliberately. A smile touched his lips, not of pride, but of amazement. He knew that in that single, breathtaking moment, he had witnessed something historic, something that transcended martial arts. It wasn't about victory over another opponent. It was about mastery over oneself, the environment, and the expectations of every observer in the room. It was a lesson in focus, strategy, and mental dominance. As the girl stood quietly, the room held its collective breath. The samurai bowed slightly, acknowledging her skill. The students bowed. Even Bruce Lee bowed, not out of ceremony, but in recognition of the extraordinary. Every mind in the dojo had been ensnared, mentally and emotionally trapped by what they had witnessed. They had seen a young girl, wielding nothing but chopsticks, outthink, outmaneuver, and outclass a legendary master. And in that moment, one undeniable truth became clear to everyone. True mastery lies not in brute force, but in the combination of mind, skill, and courage. The echoes of that battle, subtle yet profound, would linger in every mind present for years to come. Bruce Lee, the students, the samurai, and the crowd, all were forever changed. The lesson was indelible. Never underestimate anyone. Genius can appear where it is least expected, and mastery can exist in forms so unconventional that it challenges everything you thought you knew. And as the girl quietly stepped back, the dojo seemed to hum with a newfound respect for her, for skill, and for the possibilities that lie beyond expectation. The dojo was still. Not a sound, not a whisper, nothing except the weight of what had just transpired. The samurai, a figure who had once been untouchable, now stood humbled. Every muscle in his body, every ounce of his pride, had been tested and found wanting, not because of brute force, but because of brilliance, precision, and an audacity that none had anticipated. The girl lowered her chopsticks slowly, deliberately, as if signaling that her lesson was complete. She did not boast. She did not speak. She simply stood there, calm, composed, yet undeniably victorious. In that simple act, she had captured the attention of every person in the room, leaving a mark that would never fade. Bruce Lee exhaled slowly, feeling the full impact of what he had witnessed. Even he, a master of speed, strategy, and martial philosophy, had been trapped mentally by the precision and ingenuity of this young girl. Her victory was not just physical. It was psychological, a masterclass in anticipating moves, reading intentions, and turning expectations on their head. He realized, with awe, that skill could manifest in forms so unconventional that even legends might be caught off guard. The spectators, still recovering from the impossible, began to murmur. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered praises, and a few simply stared, frozen in awe. Each person's mind was racing, replaying the battle, trying to comprehend how two ordinary chopsticks had toppled a master. Mentally, emotionally, and visually, they had been ensnared, trapped in a moment that challenged everything they thought they knew about combat and capability. Even the samurai bowed his head. It was not a bow of defeat alone. It was a bow of respect, recognition, and humility. He had faced brilliance he could not counter, skill he could not predict, and mind he could not read. In that moment, he understood what everyone else now realized. Mastery is not about reputation, not about size, not about power. It is about insight, anticipation, and the courage to defy expectation. Bruce Lee's gaze lingered on the girl. He had seen greatness before, but this was something different, something transformative. It was a reminder that true skill can appear in the least expected forms, that brilliance is not confined to tradition or appearances, and that even the greatest must remain humble in the face of the extraordinary. The crowd began to release the tension they had held so tightly, their awe giving way to inspiration. Each person felt changed, challenged to see beyond assumptions, to recognize potential where it is least expected, and to appreciate the power of precision, intelligence, and fearlessness. The dojo was no longer merely a place of combat. It had become a proving ground for possibility itself. In that moment, one undeniable truth crystallized for everyone present. Skill without imagination is limited, power without vision is hollow, and mastery without courage is meaningless. The girl had demonstrated all three in a way that left a permanent imprint on the minds of those who witnessed it. She had not only defeated a legendary samurai, but she had also reshaped the perception of what it means to be a master. Bruce Lee finally allowed himself a slow, genuine smile. He understood that he had witnessed more than a battle. He had witnessed a revelation, a lesson in strategy, ingenuity, and mental dominance. A young girl, armed with nothing more than chopsticks, had taught everyone in the room, including one of the greatest martial artists of all time, that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. And as the girl quietly stepped back, her calm presence lingering like a silent echo, the dojo seemed to vibrate with a single, undeniable truth. Never underestimate anyone, and never underestimate the power of mastery in its most extraordinary form. The legend of that day would live forever, not just in the story of a samurai defeated by chopsticks, but in the minds and hearts of everyone who had witnessed brilliance incarnate.